Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the B-Side podcast. Together, my guest is Dara Sabeti. Dara, so great to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Guys, so Dara is an OG, a crypto OG. He's an investor and he's an engineer and collector. So we'll dive into all this kind of attributes and your experiences. But let's kick it off with a bit of your background and what brought you to Web3 space.
Ooh, okay. There's a lot I could go through there, but I guess the short version could be I stepped into the space personally in 2015. After having heard about it in 2013, I had a friend. This is a while ago now in school who told me about Bitcoin and everything like it, and he used his Bitcoin back then in 2013 to buy, I think it was Goat Simulator and a pizza
Okay,
online. so so I thought,
okay.
oh, what is this weird stuff, man? And anyway, fast forward 2 years later, I read the Bitcoin white paper and I thought it was extremely interesting. And even if I didn't have full conviction or a full understanding of what was going on at the time, I thought this is definitely promising enough to venture into. And I used to build PCs as like a hobby, and so I flipped a few of those into mining rigs because back then it was quite viable to use GPUs to mine, and electricity was free because I was a student. So that's how I got into the space initially. It's not as like glamorous as a lot of people out there. It was me thinking I'd missed the boat in 2015. Imagine that. And yeah, that's how I got in. Fast forward to today, got into the NFT space, working with some of the most incredible people who pioneered the space, and now I've obviously been in full time for the last 4 years.
I think we'll also talk a bit about the luxury space. So let me just ask you also a bit about that. Like I know that you had some experiences building products and stuff for this segment of the market.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, some of my background before the years that I was full time in the space does include work. So, I did aerospace engineering first and foremost. You
Hmm.
mentioned I was an engineer. A lot of people think, "Oh, software." No, it wasn't software. I could, I understand some code, but I'm not one of those, crazy genius guys who can sit and code all day. I wish I could be one of them, but I've worked with plenty of them. I'm not one of them. Aerospace is what I did. I clearly didn't follow the path of aviation. Straight out of my degree, I went into working for one of the highest end acoustics companies in the world. It was called Vertier Acoustics. They're based here in the UK. I'm in London right now. And yeah, my main role there was doing the 3D design engineering for their tone arms. So the tone arms are the part of a vinyl platter, if you know how turntables work,
Hmm.
that basically sits on the vinyl itself and transmits what is kind of physical motion into what is audio that we can hear. So I was doing
Yeah.
the 3D design engineering for those components, and because they were so high end, it ties quite nicely into aerospace engineering because we're familiar with extremely high end manufacturing processes and extremely high end materials, of course, kind of at the cutting edge. And I love material science and all that kind of thing. So it seemed like a really cool path for me to explore. But obviously, I didn't end up following that either. So so that was a different part. But that was my foray into the luxury industry in some sense, kind of working directly within it. I've had some other small facets of experience in it. But yeah, in that case, to give the viewers some context, there are some hi-fi sets that we're selling as like a bundle, a package, and they could go all the way up
Hmm.
to like $2 million. I think beyond that
Two
point,
million.
yeah, $2 million for just a hi-fi set, just for one person. It's these kind of people who attend, like the London Orchestra at like
That's a lot of Bitcoin. That's a lot of
yeah, that
Bitcoin,
is.
even at today's
Back then, it was
prices.
even more Bitcoin than it is now. Yeah, absolutely. No, it was crazy. It's really meant for those people who just want the exact recreation of what they've heard in their lounge with a volume knob to turn the volume up and down whenever they'd like. So it's incredible things that we were doing. I had a diamond point needle that sits right at the bottom of the trough of the acetate fine. I know I can get too technical with it, but it was super interesting and very educational for my design experience as well.
That's pretty awesome. So let's jump into Bitcoin and then the evolution or getting into the collector space and the
Mm.
NFTs. What brought your attention in terms of the NFTs when they were starting to get the word by the storm, actually?
Yeah, of course. So maybe to to give like the full context and the full view of this, so my first foray was 2015, and obviously there was a big cycle that happened, peaking in I think
Mm-hmm.
2017.
Yeah.
And that was around the time that it caught my attention a lot more, as it did a lot of people who'd even remotely heard about it, and a lot of people who hadn't even heard about Bitcoin were seeing it on the news for the first time ever. And obviously that was, like a lot of people around that time, it was my first time kind of really getting my teeth stuck into it. I was not a very good student. I didn't go to university a lot, so I spent a lot more time watching the markets, learning about it, and it was just an ICO craze back then. So that was the time that I got really stuck in, I'd say, to the blockchain space overall, reading about
Mm-hmm.
different cryptos, what they could bring to the market. And it was basically, at the time, it was, a lot of people compare it to the dot-com bubble. Basically any concept you can think of, slap blockchain on it, slap crypto on it, and it had potential to just go
Goes
parabolic
through the roof.
at the time.
Yeah.
If you made a nice enough website and you made some semblance of a white paper, like, thank goodness we didn't have ChatGPT back then, because oh my gosh, it would have been crazy with the white papers that they could generate. But yeah, that was the time that I kind of got my teeth stuck in and started to understand a lot more about the space, and I started reading about what was possible, and I kind of realized that everything out there was not that viable in terms of bringing new value to the market relative to what Bitcoin was doing. And then the NFT space was kind of on the back burner for me. It was like vaguely on my radar, but I wasn't thinking too much about it. I had heard about CryptoPunks. I knew that they existed. I didn't think much of them for a very long time, regrettably. In 2020, that's when the space started to become a lot more interesting. That is also when I left the job at Vertier Acoustics, and I really wanted to venture further into this entire space, basically everything blockchain related. I thought it was just too interesting, and I ended up spending so much of my time reading about it, researching about it, and investing in the space that I was like, why am I not just working on it full time? So 2020 was the time that a few of the first, let's say, more rebellious digital artists in the world were starting this movement. I like to call it a movement because it was a very important thing that happened for them. Digital artists have kind of been abused more and more by the likes of, like Hollywood and all that kind of thing. And yeah, you started to see, like, OpenSea wasn't quite a thing yet. You started to see things on Rarible, Super Rare, all that kind of thing. And that is when I met my present day co-founding partner at Clavi. I'm wearing Clavi stuff all over me right now. I look like a
We'll jump into it, definitely.
Of course. And that's when I met Max. He is one of the individuals who are part of that movement. It was a lot of like French digital artists who were part of that movement, Beeple and all them. The first guys who did Mechaverse, if everyone remembers those like crazy looking, beautiful 3D generative models. And he created one of the first collections as well that was fully generative 3D on IPFS. And that is how I ended up meeting him in 2021. But yeah, that's how I kind of set foot into the NFT space. I was a lot more lethargic setting foot into the NFT space because I was really wrapped up in the markets, because we started to have really interesting movements and developments from the likes of Ethereum and plenty of others in the space. I remember reading a lot about Hedera Hashgraph. Not a lot of people talk about them. They've built something that's super interesting, but having a great product doesn't mean that you're going to make it. So, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think over the course of this podcast, I guess, I will mention now, because we'll touch on it later, I will delve into a lot of what we're doing with Clavi, stuff that we haven't released as well. I'll be mentioning a lot of that here on this podcast as well. And of course, the most important thing that we're working on right now is a big collaboration with an NFT collection. So touching on what we're talking about now, Quirkies. These guys are new. What they're doing is super interesting, and they're working on building value in what we think matters most in the NFT space, which is a cultural brand value, which is what people care about. It all started with a sense of identity, and that's kind of what drove a lot of what NFTs was in that sort of big wave, that big phenomenon back then. And we love what they're doing now. But yeah, that's what I'm mentioning right now that I think will be important to touch on later, because I might forget because I get distracted.
Oh, that's great. That's great, man. So let's deep a bit deeper into this. So when I was referring to the NFT space, today the correlation is usually something luxurious, some PFPs or some elite clubs, I would say, some sort of belonging to a group
Like
that
a
is pretty
membership.
unique. Yeah, like a membership club, but usually pretty expensive, like in regular fiat terms. So that's why I wanted to ask about your opinion, like why people are actually attracted to the PFPs, because in essence, like materially, it is basically a JPEG that people actually own. They own it on the blockchain, and they can prove that they are the sole owner of this, but probably this is not the end of the story. To own an JPEG that is worth from a couple of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think the first thing to address is why
Mm,
the phenomenon of identity and having like an expensive profile picture took off the way it did, and I think it does tie at its roots to what has driven the luxury industry for, we can't even say centuries, it's millennia. Luxury has existed as long as like humans have existed. If there is
yeah.
something that exists that has any sort of value, there's the best version of it, and that is considered the luxury. um,
Hmm.
and then there's a lot of luxury items that don't provide functional value that we have anyway. Things like jewelry, things like art, but also, you could argue that the status and the sort of signaling that you have from it is a functional value. But then, that's a whole different sort of debate in itself. You're getting into almost like philosophical things there. Um, but I think the important parts that tied and drove a lot of what the NFT industry kind of became and what it is kind of today, and it's still evolving, is the fact that you can signal people and you can have this irrefutable proof of ownership of a
Mm,
limited collection that no one else can copy ownership of. And then a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I can just right click save and then I have it as my profile picture as well. It's not just that. You can provably own something, which is cool. But obviously, if a lot of people are kind of making fun of it and saying, oh, I right click save, it doesn't matter that much. But it's the fact that it gains you access to something that, not having ownership of it, obviously you couldn't even begin to scratch the surface of what it gives you access to. So what I'm referring
yeah.
to is, in the space, if you own a lot of these NFTs, part of these huge collections, Bored Ape, CryptoPunks, etc., you gain access to the events and you gain access to the networks, and you have maybe a certain rarity, maybe a certain trait. There are sub communities in there, and it starts to tie together all of these things that has sort of driven value, socially speaking, for us as humans, for a very, very long time. As long as sort of modern civilization has existed, these factors have been tying us together for a very long time. These sort of sub communities that we build, and then become builders groups, and then become social clubs, and all that kind of thing. And I think that's a
Hmm.
very important part of what the NFT culture has become. And the most interesting thing, at least to me, because I'm a bit of a nerd, is that for the first time, I think for the first time, really viably and discernibly, and you can point at it and say this is true, you are able to tie ownership and participation in these clubs or these membership groups, or what have you, uh, to being totally anonymous. You can exist and build a platform, whether it's on Twitter or whatever social media, and no one would know, or more importantly, care who it is behind that profile picture, which is so incredibly interesting to me. This is the first
Yeah.
time that people have really not cared who's behind it. Obviously, you have celebrities out there who have like sort of sub PFPs and subdomains and sub platforms, and we kind of know who it is and we kind of don't. But only the people who really care to do the research know what's going on there. Um, but I think that's
Sure.
probably the most interesting part of what NFTs have enabled when it comes to the sort of luxury industry. It allows you to have a piece of art or a collectible uh, without revealing who you are, and still building a platform and still signaling from it. You used to have to, if you're a wealthy guy, they say like art is the sort of final grail. It's the end game for extremely wealthy individuals. But the thing is, it's either you have it and you don't show it to anyone. And my partner Max calls this self luxury. So we know a lot of wealthy individuals who'll have like a crazy bits of art in their home. Rembrandts, all that kind of thing, and no one will know that they exist there. It's sitting in their like private office suite, and no one can know because they want to maintain a low profile. And then,
Yeah,
of course, you have the more opulent and maybe slightly vain in some people's perspectives, wealthy individuals out there who they buy it for the purpose of showing it off. They buy it for the purpose of elevating their platform,
sure.
elevating their influence, and they can leverage these things, and it's useful to a lot of people out there too. But NFTs have allowed some blurring of the line between those two groups of wealthy individuals who want to invest or just outright buy for their own pleasure luxury products, which I think is extremely interesting. And that's
Yeah,
why it's one of those main utilities that drove the entire industry.
that's a super interesting point actually, because yeah, as you said, like in essence, it allows for people to combine the privacy that I want to keep with the same with the ability to actually express that they actually are the owners and they are actually behind the certain asset and they can
Mm.
participate in certain groups. That's pretty awesome. So given that, and given your guys' background in luxury space and understanding, I would say this is probably the most important part. Understanding why luxury products will always have their market, will always have their niche.
Mm.
Uh, what was the ultimate inspiration for the hardware wallet that you guys are building at Clavi?
Um, so actually, the conception of Clavi didn't involve too much thought into the luxury segment. We were
Okay.
addressing a need. Yeah, yeah. That's it. It evolved into what it is today for a multitude of reasons, and we can get into those in a moment. But the conception of it was actually more about addressing needs,
Hmm.
and this is the needs of the wealthy. This is the needs of the people who have invested a significant amount of money for them into the industry. And I sort of qualified with the for them, because you could have two individuals, same net worth, same amount of money in their bank account, and a significant amount of money for them to invest into something could be a completely different number, which is a very
Sure.
interesting thing about humans and how we perceive
It's
value.
very subjective.
It's extremely subjective with a very wide range. And what we wanted to do was create something that addresses this incredibly broad, high ranging need from these individuals. So for whomever it is, whatever you consider a significant amount of wealth, if you're investing it in this industry, you have a lot of things on chain. There's a plethora of problems you have to tackle, which had not been tackled from a sort of user experience point of view.
Hmm.
Um, and then from an access point of view, we spoke a lot about access in the luxury industry, and that's kind of a lot of what it gives you, and that's what a lot of what the NFT space gives you. But then we also see every day still a ton of people who have their wallets drained, and a lot of these are cold wallets, which is the weird part. And this
Yeah.
comes back to a sort of misconception about security, where people think it's binary. You either have security or you don't. It's just not true. It's very linear, and it's made up of a lot of little facets. One of the most important ones is user experience. It's that
Hmm.
front end that we interact with, a degree of familiarity that we need, and some soft filters, are what we call them, that enable us to stay safe when doing anything on a day-to-day basis. I'll draw a parallel for you. Banking apps. When you're adding a
Hmm.
new payee, it will ask you, hey, do you know this person? We've checked and their name doesn't match the account. This was created yesterday. It'll give you all of these sort of analytics-based bullet points saying, we have good reason to believe that this is good to go or not a
Yellow
good idea.
flags, exactly. Yellow
Yeah,
or red
exactly.
flags
Exactly.
to some
Totally.
extent, right?
Yeah, precisely. And those just did not exist in this
Yeah.
industry at all. Even though we've had cold wallets for a very long time. I bought my own first ledger back in 2015. Absolutely adored the original founders. They had a ton of vision. I mean, I think they conceptualized the first ledger in like 2011. So, really,
Hmm.
really early on. They clearly knew what was going to happen, and they built that amazing product that addressed the needs of the time. But it quite simply hasn't evolved a ton in terms of the user experience and the product that you're using. And that is the need that we were addressing. We were addressing
Hmm.
this market of people who've put a lot more of their money into this industry. It started to become a big seismic investment for a ton of people. And the user experience had not caught up with the sort of demographic of people that were coming into it. And even the people who could and can understand how to navigate the space in a relatively safe way. We're humans, we slip up, we make mistakes. That's why we build these filtration layers, to protect ourselves, so that when we're tired, or maybe some people have had a little bit too much to drink or something like that, we can protect ourselves. That's the point. And that's actually the initial need that we were addressing. So it was for, clearly a wealthier segment of the market, but luxury wasn't the initial, let's say, pursuit that we were going after. We realized that luxury makes a ton of sense. Firstly, between myself and Maxime, we have a ton of overlap and experience in the luxury sector, but doing completely different things. I was building things, physical things, manufacturing things, and understanding what the luxury segment wants and how they behave and their buying habits. It's a very different ball game. And Maxime's, he's like a veteran of the luxury industry. He's done motion design work and worked with McLaren, Givenchy, Lancôme, Hublot, the watches, etc. So he understands the brand value and the market, and how to get the brand value of a company who is in the luxury segment out there, and how to target the correct individuals to create a real sense of allure, which is a very difficult thing. It's a fine line to tread. And a lot of people who have no experience in the luxury sector think it's almost like luck. And then they ask you, oh, but don't you need a lot of history to be in the luxury segment? Omega, the watches have been around for so long. And we're like, yeah, but how long has Richard Mille been around? Not very long. How long has Pagani automobiles been around? Not very long. So there's tons more examples that we can get into, but it is something that you can execute on. And it is something that we have a lot of experience with, and just made a ton of sense for what we do, because in the end of the day, even having some of these profile pictures in the NFT space is a luxury in itself. And so it only made sense to build a luxury product, because as well, you don't have a mass market in this space. There is no mass market. So why would you build a mass market oriented product? These low cost, thin margin, little USB stick looking devices, for a mass market that is simply not there. And then you end up just selling more and more of them to the same people. And I'm quite confident when I speak for a lot of people and say, we don't buy more of the same cold wallets because we love them so much. No, we're buying them out of fear, because of that unaddressed user experience, security, filtration, all of those issues. It's completely unaddressed. We buy the ledgers and we buy the Trezors and we buy a ton of other cold wallets out of straight fear. And we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, because we're suddenly feeling the weight of that responsibility. We became very comfortable with the banking sector and how, you can have your money insurance backed and all that kind of thing. But then there are a whole load of problems plaguing, let's say, traditional finance right now. And also the exchanges that have stepped into the space, you can't really trust them as much. We watched FTX collapse. That's the one that really made the headlines worldwide. Everyone had their eyes on Sam Bankman-Fried, but unfortunately, he wasn't the first one to do it. He's also not even the biggest to have done what he did. There are people who have taken a lot more money out of other people's pockets using exchanges and that kind of thing. But it is a good thing that it made global headlines, and it is a good thing that people became aware of it. But it just further highlights the needs that need addressing in this market. I went off on a complete tangent there, so you're gonna have to bring me back on track.
I mean, we went the full circle to some extent, I would say, but I would really love to explore more about how Clavi and your wallet is going to make it simpler and better for the users, for your particular segment of the users, to access the space and feel comfortable with. Because I completely agree. My background has been also involved with building a hardware wallet. So I feel like I really understand all the pain points that you described. And for many similar reasons, we were building a product for this market. But, just wanted to explore a bit more about the methods and the ways to actually address those issues. If you could just explain a couple of points.
So as it's been made clear already, our prerogative was redefining what the user experience should be when taking self-custody, to the point where the previous way of doing it is just so foreign, it's unrecognizable, and it's almost not even a parallel. What I mean by that, tangibly, is we've built a product that makes it not just easy, but also quite interesting and fun to play with, to use. It is supposed to be a physical incarnation of peace of mind. That's what it is. It sits on your desk. It looks pretty. It is not, and this is another issue with the greater space, I think, it is not trying to replace your existing points of interaction, which are things made by incredibly big companies who have spent decades iterating on what they've done. And I'm talking about the phones that we have, Apple, Google, etc. We use these existing points of interaction, and they're refined and they're incredible, and we don't want to replace them. So much of our lives depend on them. Even if you're working or if you're not,
Yeah.
they will exist continuously as your main points of interaction when using Clavi. So Clavi is intended to be a companion that acts, like I say, as your physical incarnation of peace of mind. And how it works in the back end is it gives you easy access to existing technologies. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're taking a ton of existing technologies that are kind of traditionally cordoned off to most people, including some very techie people, because it's hard to just keep up with how many services and bits of software exist to keep us safe and to help us navigate the industry. I'm talking about things like Delegate. It was .cash, now it's .xyz. You have Warm.xyz. You have WalletGuard, a fantastic, incredible company that we're working with. They started out with something as simple as a Chrome extension, and it can literally intercept a malicious transaction before it happens.
Before it
Amazing
happens.
thing. Yeah, you could be clicking sign and it will jump in and say, hey, we have very strong reason to believe that this is a malicious transaction. Exactly what we spoke about with the banking apps. It's those soft filtration layers. And having all of these bits of software and services in one place is what we need. But like I say, keeping up with it is extremely difficult. And having it all in one place is also extremely difficult. We know plenty of people building in the space. These guys are very established, some of them with very commendable backgrounds, a ton of credibility, who slip up because they're humans, and on their main device, on their main machine, their main existing point of interaction, they have all of those safeguards in place. But then they see something, they want to make a quick transaction, and they're traveling. All they've got is their laptop with them, and they haven't put all of those safeguards like WalletGuard, etc., in place, and they slip up. And they get tricked, and it's a phishing website, or it's a replica of what they thought that they've done a million times. And because they didn't have it bookmarked, all of these like sort of little, like I say, soft filtration layers that we set for ourselves. It's like having the website that you trust being bookmarked, all those things. They have their wallets trained. And in this case, I'm not going to name him because he's a lovely guy and he was building something incredible, but he's a human and he slipped up. He lost the funds for his company too, which is another pain point that I'm sure as well. I mean, for the viewers' context, Jakob and I met because of his previous work with another brilliant called Wallet company. So we love the technology behind it. And this is a pain point that exists for everyone.
Yeah.
So anyway, he slipped up, and because it was a single point of failure, it's one seed that needs to be compromised, and suddenly all of the funds are gone. And that is what happened. And that's why people buy, multiple cold wallets, but then you're just making your user experience a nightmare. It's fragmented. You have multiple things to keep track of and take care of. But yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. So usually people don't buy 4 phones for banking applications, right? So I understand that this is probably not the future of the hardware wallets to have like.
We don't think so, at least.
Yeah, exactly. Great. So I think that Clavi is going to bring like a new quality to the market, and I think that this is very much needed. But how do you think about the future with respect to Bitcoin? Because in this podcast, I always like to ask also about your first interactions with the space, which usually starts with Bitcoin, and then to close it exactly as it should. And, in some, the best cases also with reading the white paper. And then I'm jumping into the future and how you perceive, given all the improvements, I would say expansion of the whole industry into NFT, zero knowledge proofs, institutional adoption, all this kind of in taking all of that into account and then seeing what is the role of Bitcoin, the grandpa Bitcoin that is not moving so fast, that is just, every 10 minutes, just mining new block, and that's it. Like,
Yep.
it's boring stuff.
Yeah. I like that you use the word boring, because when you're looking at things that have a function that they are supposed to execute and they're supposed to be good at, they tend to become boring. And boring is a sign that it's doing it well, because there's something crazy or shocking or interesting happening. To a lot of people, Bitcoin isn't boring yet. And I think those are mostly the new entrants. For the people who've been in the space for a longer time, Bitcoin is becoming boring. But I think that is only a sign that it is going in exactly the direction it is supposed to be going. I mean, it was initially made, you can read the white paper, as intended to be something that's the new form of money, new form of transaction, of trading value between two individuals, and it executes on that exceedingly well. It does it. It's done it for a very long time, albeit a bit slowly for some people's taste, which is fine. I mean, we now have layers on top. We call it Lightning, and like it sounds, it's very fast. It's lightning speed. It's great. And the part that most people spend their time talking about when it comes to Bitcoin is using it as a store of value. A lot of people equate it to gold. And in a lot of measurable ways, it is better than gold. I mean, with developing technology and developing mechanical engineering practices, mining practices, like physical mining, not mining Bitcoin, physical mining practices, we keep finding more gold, which is not good for what gold is meant to be doing, which is being
because its supply, supply is growing. Yeah.
Bitcoin is mathematically finite. Everyone can read it. Everyone can look at it. Whether or not you understand it is a different question. But all you need to understand it is that it is mathematically finite, and it is impossible to create more than the 21 million that will one day will be kind of working towards a sort of exponential have in circulation. And that's what's important about Bitcoin. And I think that's what's interesting about Bitcoin in using it as a store of value. But what I find interesting is that it wasn't the initial intention when it was created. It's just the sort of byproduct, because it's so good at what it does. It just does this one simple thing perfectly. And so when I get asked, what do you see as the future of Bitcoin? I just see this boring trajectory becoming more boring in the coming years, and everyone looks at the industry like it's cycles on a 4-year basis. And I think we had huge moments of volatility when it comes, it's around every 4 years we have halving, where when miners are mining, what they get as a reward is literally halved, and that is mathematically driving up the value, the dollar value of Bitcoin, because it is not worth it to mine if the value is too low, and so people will switch off their mining rigs. But then there's less miners, and it finds its own balance naturally over time, which is a fantastic sort of autonomous mechanism that no one has to pay attention to, and no one can change, which is the really important part. I think the fact that there's
I think I sorry to jump in, but I just love the mentioning of Satoshi, that he never foresaw like the store of value kind of function of Bitcoin.
It wasn't maybe he foresaw it, but he didn't intend it, I don't think.
But I think there's one more piecing element to it. I mean, maybe he didn't foresaw it for one reason, because he didn't even maybe anticipate how bad the economy and the legacy fiat currencies will do, right? Because what we are seeing during the last couple of years is basically a disaster. Probably since 2020, 20 or 21, the dollar value dropped by 25%, literally during this time only. So
it's not really slowing down, is it?
and and in the next couple of years, Bitcoin will do probably extremely well because of those two elements, right? It's super boring and doing its job perfectly in the boring way, and then And then governments and fiat currencies doing their job
Mm.
so badly that they are devaluating at such a high pace. So
Mm.
probably we're at the verge of those two dynamics, melting together that
Yeah,
ends
and
up
they're both going in opposite directions, but the end result
exactly.
is pushing up the value of Bitcoin when measured in dollar, which is, that's kind of what everyone measures it in. So for sure.
Exactly. So I believe we're here on the very same page, and
Mm.
we wish Bitcoin to just stay boring, and
Yeah,
the other technologies, to help it scale, such as Lightning or
for sure.
Liquid
For
or
sure.
any other technologies. And then for the industry to bring something really, really substantially better to the market in order for us to actually get um, um, get use of this, to get empowered
Hmm.
to use of those technologies in a much more
Absolutely. And again,
simple.
it just comes back. Sorry, by the way. It just comes back to access. We need
Yeah,
easy, frictionless access
yeah,
to something that is this fundamentally important that's happening in our lifetimes that we've watched. I think we've watched history develop, not just with Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is obviously the seismic entity that started all of this, but I think with NFTs as well, this luxury phenomenon that we're developing out, and I'll touch on Quirkies in a second as well, because we're hoping to really redefine history.
yeah,
Maybe not redefine. We're looking to make history and redefine what it is to have a collectible and to have something special and interesting that you can show, but you can also say private with. We think privacy is so important, and Bitcoin also enables that, and that is why Bitcoin is this seismic entity that's so important for the future as well. But it does come back. It just comes back to access. What we're building is easy access to these incredible tools, to these incredible facets of empowerment for our daily lives that I think everyone should have. And we're living in a world now where, unfortunately, a subscription model works better and rental models work better, and we're owning less and less. All the value
yeah,
that we create just gets pushed straight out of our wallets, back into the hands of others, so that we can have these services and we can live our lives as we would want to, maintaining a certain quality of life. And it ends up with the individual just owning less and less, which I think is a horrifying dystopian future that we're heading towards.
yeah.
And this all not only flies in the face of it, but it is actively resisting and pushing back at it with incredible force, which I love to see. Bitcoin
Absolutely.
and NFTs and the future of what they present. People talk about RWA, real world assets, all of these things that have potential to be developed on the platform of NFTs, thanks to a lot of what Ethereum is developing as well. This is all enabled by blockchain, by that irrefutable nature of how it works. Again, Bitcoin started the phenomenon, and I love to see what develops from it. Um, I believe we'll see a future where we create and destroy wallets as and when we need them. Will have thousands to our name, and we don't even realize. And this is how, also tying back to Clavi and what we're doing. Obviously, it's what I spend my whole day on, so I'm just going to tie back to it. Um, it is the future that we're looking at, that we design for, and then we work backwards to make what
Hmm.
works today. It is this future where we'll have many wallets. Some will be for the store of value. We'll keep maybe a big lump sum of Bitcoin in there, maybe a few other things, maybe a gold backed token as well.
Hmm.
Hopefully, won't be hacked through some bridge exploit or something like that. Hopefully, we'll have insurance backing and all that kind of thing as well developing. It is important that we have institutional and regulatory systems take hold, and not only understand it, but develop mindful processes and regulations for it as well, because there's been a lot of issues with regulatory entities trying to force categorization of existing things in the blockchain space into, this is a security, this is all these other kind of pre-existing things that they've created these structures for. It's obviously easy. It's a slightly lazy thing to do, if you ask me. This is a very
Yeah,
new asset class, and multiple asset classes will come of it. RWA being its own whole category. It's not just one thing. RWA can be a car. A real world asset can be a car whose ownership deeds are on chain. It could also be a house. And I hope to see the future at least in our lifetimes, where we can wake up one day and create a wallet because we have an NFT which is representing a concert ticket. Maybe we're going to see a Taylor Swift concert or something like that, and we'll create a wallet and we'll put a hologram in it, to show ownership of it, because it makes absolutely no sense to take your bank vault out with you to
Sure.
show that you own this concert ticket. So this is what I mean when I say creation and destruction of wallets as and when we need them. And I hope as well that we'll have all of these wallets and all of this easy access to seeing our full digital portfolios in one place, that we can wake up one morning and we can just list our house for sale, and it can just sell very quickly and efficiently in an instant, using smart contracts for all the legal documentation and all that kind of thing. All these things that are made possible by the platforms being developed on chain.
I think to some
Yeah.
extent we are there, with the tech to some extent, and now the infrastructure has to catch up. Like by
Yeah.
infrastructure, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily only mean the technical applications, etc., but I also mean the legal environment, regulators, blah blah blah, all this kind of
Mm-hmm.
environment that has to agree to some extent that, yeah, like this is the new way of doing stuff. This is the
Mm-hmm.
new much better way of doing things. But I think what you're describing is probably happening during our lifetime. I hope so as well. Um,
I hope, I believe so. I believe so. Yeah.
can you just also mention a bit more about the cooperation between you guys and Quirkies, so that we could
Oh, of
wrap it up
course.
with
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
bomb? Can you share a bit more that
Yeah.
hasn't been
So
shared publicly yet?
of course, yeah. That's I was actually quite excited to do that, but there's so much we can talk about and cover. Also, because I'm just a complete nerd, I can get sidetracked easily. So Quirkies represents a very historic moment for us at Clavi. We are doing our very first fully bespoke line of just 12 devices that will drop as a full collaboration with Quirkies. What I mean by that is these will be all unique designs in the
Hmm.
Quirkies streetwear theme and brand image. We've released some previews of how they look already. What we haven't fully released are a few things that come with it. So, we talked about collectability, about building history, about making history right now and today. All of these devices will have the signatures of the founders of the Quirkies team. So the main guys that everyone knows are Sign and Pappy. Everyone freaking loves Pappy. He's an amazing guy. He's done wonders for, I think, the Quirkies brand and growing them. And like I say, I think this is the most important facet of value of the NFT industry and NFT culture that they've just focused on. And that's why they're doing
Hmm.
so well. This is about building a culture. It's not about treating your NFT community like customers or treating them like shareholders. Both are a mistake. And for some reason, a lot of entities thought that there were only those two options. And I can
Hmm.
point out a lot of collections who have made grave errors in treating their holders like customers and just trying to sell them more and more stuff, treating them like freaking cash machines, like little cash cows to siphon
Cash
value out of them.
cows.
It's a
Yeah.
hard thing to, yeah, it's a hard thing to do. And on the other hand, you shouldn't treat all of these guys like shareholders. You have a select few who, in a community, you always have to find the balance, and you always have the people who are going to have a louder voice than the amount of them that there are relative to the community, and they will have some entitlement about them, and if you give just so much control, like shareholder control, to a community of people, you're making the future extremely uncertain. There has to be
Yeah.
some degree of unification to a direction here, and I think this is
Yeah.
what Quirkies are just absolutely nailing. It is about the community. It is about the cultural development. Their event that I attended in New York was absolutely phenomenal. I loved what they were doing there. We handed out these cards actually as well that I brought a few with me. I forgot about them. We handed out these cards that represent our collaboration. I don't know if it can be seen. My camera
Yeah.
quality isn't
Yeah.
that great, and it got scratched up. Um, if you have one of these cards as well, for the Quirkies listeners out there, make sure you hold on to them. They represent a ton of value that you can get from us, from the Clavi team, and our collaboration with Quirkies. You gain value back to us. You gain, you're right there.
Sorry.
You gain rights to exclusive merchandise that's co-designed between our world-class designers and the Quirkies team. We won't be making many of them. There will be an exclusive line of skateboards as well, which I think looks sick. I used to skate a lot when I was younger. My knees can't handle it right now, which will be awesome as well. But in
That's
essence,
awesome.
these devices will be our first ever ones that represent a collaboration with any brand out there. And I liken this to imagine back in the day. I don't know if you know this. There was a very interesting collaboration that happened in the very early days of Rolex's existence with
Okay.
Disney. Both of these companies were in their infancy. No one knew about either of them. But back in the day, Omega was like all the craze. Rolex was not big until, let's say, the last 40 odd years, after sort of quartz crisis of the 70s. I'm a bit of a watch nerd, so excuse excuse that. But there was a very interesting and cool collaboration that happened between Rolex and Disney. And now everything that came of that collaboration is just unbelievable to think about. These seismic entities, Rolex and Disney, they did a collaboration way back then when both of them barely existed. And I believe that this can be an equivalent of what we're doing today. This is our first foray into it. We're staying super conservative. We're only doing 12 devices. There's only ever going to be 12 people who will have these devices. And of course, you know, as an individual, and maybe the viewers will start to understand, we're trying to turn the ownership of what we're making when it comes to electronic devices as well on its head. You buy a phone nowadays and you're expecting it to fail in like a few years and you're going to have to buy another.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be the case. Clavi ownership is perpetual. We're designing a device and we're making an entity that is designed to outlive us and you.
That's cool.
It is meant to create and instill trust in your legacy. This is an entire ecosystem of services and a piece of ownership that will define what your legacy is as an individual, with everything that you own, with everything that you've made, with everything that you've done, whether you've become a classical musician and you've written the most incredible thing ever and you're likened to Mozart, you can put that on chain. It can be irrefutable. It will be burned in on chain for the rest of history. And I think everything that is enabled by the simple and beautiful thing that is blockchain is what we are hoping to push forward with everything that we make. And Quirkies is representational of the first very big milestone for us of making these first 12 devices that are completely bespoke to the individual. Half of them will come preloaded with a Quirkies NFT, by the way, as well, which kind of makes it feel like it's free in a sense because the value is equatable. We're doing the full 12 at 2 Ethereum. We have a registration process. We don't do mints. We're keeping it secure. We're keeping it personal. We're giving you a personal relationship. We're likened to a sort of Amex Platinum or private banking level service. So you'll talk to us, you'll sit down with us, with our design team and everything like that, and we'll talk you through everything that you get. You get this beautiful evolving SBT made by the world-class designers that as it evolves, it is representational of what part of the journey you're on. And you're going to be on a very long journey because this is the luxury process. And we like to service everyone that we work with extremely well because that is just what we do. And I think what we need in this sort of space, a very personal relationship with the people that we work with and the people that you interact with in this space. So
that's just like
things that are dropped throughout it.
That's just like another level, Dara. It's just like I love like the story. You got me. I'll probably have to look into this much more
sure. You
deeply.
pick up a Quirkies.
Exactly.
You pick up a Quirkies first, and then you can fill out the registration form. Then we might select you for the 12.
Exactly.
12. I'm pretty sure the team are also filling out registration forms at Quirkies. So
I can imagine.
We'll see how that goes. Super exciting.
Super exciting stuff, man. I really loved your insights. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. So if you guys enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up button. And also, if you want to make your first step into the Bitcoin space but don't know how to start, please make sure to visit bitcoinfocus.com and sign up for a free consultation. Thank you so much, Dara, once again for dropping by.
Thanks so much for having me.
I really love the conversation. We'll put all the details in the footnotes, so guys, you will be able to follow Dara and the developments of Clavi. Thanks again.